Well, welcome to the message this week for First Church of the Nazarene. I'm here in the chapel inside Zephyr Hills First Church of the Nazarene, and it's very cold in Florida. I'm actually recording this on Sunday morning. I didn't get to it Saturday, so here it is. You'll never know what that is. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes I get up early and do it, and sometimes it happens on Saturday or earlier in the week every now and then. But this is when it's quiet around here. During the week, there's too much noise outside with cars and traffic and all that. So the weekend is the best time to record this. And it happens to be a very cold Sunday morning in Florida, about 26 degrees. And we're not used to this. We're not ready for this normally. So here we go. I'm going to hope that my voice and sinuses and all that cooperates. But we're going to be looking at the story of Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead in John chapter 11. And I want to get right into it here, reading the first 16 verses. Now a certain man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village where Mary and her sister Martha lived. Now it was this Mary who anointed the Lord with perfumed oil and wiped his feet dry with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. So the sister sent a message to Jesus. Lord, look, the one you love is sick. When they heard this, he said, this sickness will not end in death, but to God's glory, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he remained in the place where he was for 2 more days. Then after this he said to his disciples, let us go to Judea again. The disciples replied, Rabbi, the Jewish leaders were just now trying to stone you to death. Are you going there again? Jesus replied, are there not 12 hours in a day? If anyone walks around in the daytime, he does not stumble, because he sees the light of this world. But if anyone walks around at night, he stumbles because the light is not in him. After he said this, he added, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm going there to awaken him. Then the disciples replied, Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will recover. Now Jesus had been talking about his death, but they thought he'd been talking about natural sleep. Then Jesus told them plainly, Lazarus has died, and I am glad for your sake that I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him. So Thomas, called Didymus, said to his fellow disciples, let us go too, that we may die with him. This was taking place, if we were to back up a chapter in John and read chapter 10, we would see this incident that Jesus got into with the religious leaders. And of course, we're in this journey to the cross in our sermon series, and we're seeing some of those things taking place in the scriptures. And Jesus was at a feast in Jerusalem, and they asked for him to answer plainly if he was the Christ. And to them, apparently he answered plainly enough, because they picked up rocks to stone him. And then he questions them, what good works are you stoning me for? And they said, we're not going to stone you for good works, but for blasphemy, because you, a mere man, are claiming to be God. So they didn't seem to believe him, or they wouldn't allow themselves to believe in him. But at least to the people that were ready to kill Jesus, there was enough proof that he was claiming to be the Messiah, the Son of God. And so for people out there that say that Jesus never claimed to be the Son of God, they're wrong. They're looking at it with modern, like Western 21st century eyes. And if we look at it with first century Jewish Eastern lenses, we would see that Jesus definitely did very explicitly claim to be the Messiah. He just did it in a way that made sense to them, not in a way that makes sense to us. It was plainly clear to them what he was saying and doing. So along the journey to the cross, there's different things that took place. And one of those is the story of Lazarus dying and Jesus raising him back to life. And how that plays into not only faith for those who would believe in Jesus, but it doubles down the efforts to silence him. And we're going to see why. But what we'll end up looking at today is the fact that there were the opponents of Jesus who wanted to shut him down because they didn't want to allow him to be the Messiah, the ruler. And there are times that we don't want that in our lives either, much to our shame and to our downfall. So Jesus, when that had happened, he had gone over to a place called Bethany beyond the Jordan. Now there's a town of Bethany where Mary, Martha, and Lazarus lived. But somewhere around 18 or 20 miles further from there to the east, there's a place called Bethany beyond the Jordan. It's on the other side of the Jordan River. And this is where John was baptizing people. This is where one of his baptism sites had been, and this is where we believe Jesus was baptized. And Jesus spent some time there. Now they had been trying to kill him, so he went over there, and he spent time ministering there. There was people around him, and apparently it was known where he was. It's not like he was hiding in a cave somewhere impossible to find, but he was there, able to be seen and to minister to others. And when Lazarus became sick, the sisters sent word to Jesus that the one whom he loved was sick. Now these were people, a brother and two sisters, that were very well known by Jesus. He spent time with them, spent time in their home. It seems as if perhaps his home was like a guest home for him when he would go to the festivals, when he would go to Jerusalem. It's kind of like we have some friends up in Tennessee that are not far from Nashville. We can park our motorhome there if we want to go visit our in-laws or Amy's parents up in Nashville. Want to go see my sister up there. We can take our motorhome and put it there in their side yard and plug it in and hook up to water and sewer, and we can just kind of have a place to be, and then from there we can go into Nashville and see our friends and family. And so it's just kind of a convenient place just a few miles away. Bethany was a couple miles away from Jerusalem, and Jesus could stay at the home of Lazarus and his sisters and yet still go in and out of Jerusalem fairly easily with just a short walk of a couple miles. But now he's in Bethany beyond the Jordan. They sent word to him that Lazarus was sick, and instead of coming right away, he waits for 2 more days. Now, being around a 20-mile-ish journey, you could do that in one hard push, one day, or you might take a day and a half, 2 days to do that journey. And so it might have taken the messenger a day to get there, and if Jesus had left the next morning, it still would have taken a couple days before he came back, and Lazarus may have been dead at that point for 3 days even. So even if Jesus had come right away, it seems as if Lazarus would have already been dead. But Jesus waits 2 days and then comes over. Now, at this point, he says to his disciples when he's ready to leave, he says, okay, let's go to Lazarus. He's fallen asleep. Jesus knew that Lazarus had already died at that point. And so even if Jesus had left immediately, he might not have been there while Lazarus was still alive. Even though one of the sisters, Martha, says, Lord, if you had just come, he would have been okay. So Jesus, he's ready to go, and his disciples say, Lord, this isn't a good plan. They're kind of looking out for him. They say, Lord, you shouldn't go there. They were just trying to kill you over there. And he says, there's 12 hours in the day. Walk in the daylight. In other words, I'm here for a certain amount of time. While I'm here, walk with me, live for me, do what I say. If you walk around at night, you stumble because the light is not in you. So then he says, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep. And they think, well, if he's asleep, maybe he'll recover. That's good for him, right? He says, no, I'm not going to wake him up from a nap. I'm not going to wake him up from his rest. He's dead, and I'm going to bring him back to life. They didn't seem to be too hung up on that fact. They didn't challenge that and say, really, you're gonna raise a man to life? I mean, we've seen you do some pretty cool stuff, but really raising a guy to life? I don't know, Jesus. No, what they focus in on is the fact that he's going to die. And so Thomas says, you know what? Let's go die with him. We're his disciples. We got nothing left to lose. If he's gone, we go with him, and let's just go ahead and die with him there. And so they leave. And so you can imagine for a day or two, the disciples are thinking, we're all about to go die. It's cool. Whatever. Kind of an Eeyore mentality, like, it's okay. My house fell down again, and it's cloudy. No, they were probably moping around for a couple days, so their mind wasn't in the proper place. They weren't spiritually prepared for what was about to happen. I mean, raising somebody to life is a spiritual thing. It's a physical thing, but it's definitely a spiritual thing, and you got to be prepared for that. There are moments in your life that you may not be prepared for, spiritually speaking. There are things that God may want to do in your life or in the lives of people around you, and yet if you're not spiritually prepared at the drop of a hat, in other words, if you haven't been spending time with God, devoted and regularly, then you won't be ready for what's about to happen. And there may be things that God is calling on you to do and people he's calling you to minister to that you may not be prepared for because you haven't spent your time with God. Jesus always spent time in prayer. Jesus always spent time with the Father. He was always ready. So they go there and they show up. I want to read a few more verses. When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had been in the tomb for 4 days already. Now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem. So many of the Jewish people of that region had come to Martha and Mary to console them over the loss of their brother. So when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary was sitting in the house. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will grant you." Jesus replied, "Your brother will come back to life again." Martha said, "I know that he will come back to life in the resurrection at the last day." But Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even if he dies. And the one who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" By the way, we've all got to answer that question. She replied, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God who comes into the world." Wow. That's beautiful. What a beautiful, concise yet complete statement of faith that she made. Peter had done a similar thing at Caesarea Philippi, and now she makes this. There's not many people who are willing to put their whole faith and life on the line, to put their faith in Jesus before he's died and rose again. But a couple people seem to get it, and she got it right here. She understood this. And yet in her grief, I'm sure there was some confusion in her brain, not on this point, but on what was happening and what Jesus was about to do. She wasn't ready for it. But she's mentioned that it's been 4 days, or the story mentions it's been 4 days that Lazarus had been in the tomb. Now, the Jewish people believed that there was, for 3 days, that the spirit of a person after death would hover over them, hoping to return. That perhaps maybe the person wasn't really dead and was in a coma or something like that. They believed that the spirit of the person hovered over them for 3 days, and that after that it would depart and it would go to the place of the dead. But that the 4th day meant that this person was dead. The decay was setting in. This person wasn't going to recover from some illness that they thought was death or anything like that, or wasn't going to come back to life somehow. That this person was dead at 4 days. And so when Jesus meets Martha and meets up with her, she comes to him and she speaks to him, and she makes this confession about his lordship, his messiahship, but also they have this discussion about resurrection. And she believes that Lazarus will come back to life in the resurrection. Jews were believing in a resurrection at this point. It hadn't always been a thing, but they believe now in the resurrection of the dead. They believe that there would be life after death. That there would be life, like after we were dead, that there would be life again. And they believed that. But Jesus is saying, no, I'm talking about right now. But he doesn't really hover in on that. He just kind of leaves that alone. He says, "Do you believe? The one who believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" She says, "I believe you're the Christ, the Son of God, who comes into the world." We can't skip this. We can't just get over this part. You see, we have to understand, we have to believe, we have to anchor our lives in the fact that Jesus is the resurrection and the life. That in no other person is found this, that in only the person of Jesus Christ. It's not even in a statement of belief. It's not in living according to a certain doctrine or checking off certain boxes. Life is found in Jesus Christ, and if we look for it in anything else, we miss out on that. He's not only our life today, but he's our life in the age to come. He's our resurrection. In his resurrection, we find our new life. So, this is key. This is important. But we're going to turn the page and start in verse 40 and read a few more things. Jesus responded, "Didn't I tell you that if you believe, you would see the glory of God?" Now remember, he had started out when he talked with his disciples that this didn't happen for any reason other than for the glory of God. This death wouldn't end in death, but that it would be for the glory of God and the glory of God's Son. So here we are in verse 40. So I think Jesus is talking to his disciples specifically. "Didn't I tell you, if you believe, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone from the tomb. Jesus looked upward and said, "Father, I thank you that you always listen to me. But I've said this for the sake of the crowd standing around me here, so that they may believe you sent me." When he had said this, he shouted in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The one who had died came out, his hands and feet tied up with strips of cloth, and a cloth wrapped around his face. Jesus said to them, "Unwrap him and let him go." Then many of the people who had come with Mary and had seen the things Jesus did believed in him. Mary, remember, she had been home. She was mourning there, but when she came to Jesus, all the people came and followed her, the people that had been from Jerusalem that had come to console them. So now there's people from Jerusalem that have come with Mary to the tomb, and now they are there when Jesus calls this out. When they see Lazarus out, when the people who had come with Mary had seen the things Jesus did, they believed in him. Now these are regular folks from Jerusalem, and now they are putting their faith in Jesus Christ. But some of them went to the Pharisees and reported to them what Jesus had done. So the chief priests and the Pharisees called the council together and said, "What are we doing? For this man is performing many miraculous signs. If we allow him to go on in this way, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away our sanctuary and our nation." Real quickly, I want to talk about 4 things that were Jewish expectations of the Messiah. There were 4 miracles. Now, they believed the Messiah would do several other things, but there were specifically 4 types of miracles that the Jewish people believed that a Messiah would have to do in order to be proved to be the Messiah. The first thing was that he would have to cleanse somebody that had leprosy. If you had leprosy, it was believed to be from the finger of God. And there's no record of any Jewish people ever being cleansed of leprosy in the Scriptures. The Scriptures don't have a record of that. They have a record of Naaman, the Syrian army commander that came to Israel and was cleansed, but they don't have a record of any Jewish people ever being cleansed of leprosy. And so they believed that the Messiah would be able to do that. They also believed that the Messiah would be able to cast out a demon that was deaf and mute. See, there were people, and there's record of exorcists throughout time in this time and afterwards. And even Jesus says, "If I drive out demons as you accuse me by Beelzebul, then who do your people use to drive them out?" In other words, they were driving out demons. They were exorcising demons. But Jesus was doing this as well, and they were accusing him of doing it by the power of Satan rather than by the power of God, because they didn't want to believe. But they had their formula for how they would cast out demons. What they would do is they would come up to the person that was allegedly possessed by a demon, an unclean spirit, an evil spirit, and they would ask it what its name was. They would ask what the name of that unclean spirit was. And it would speak using the vocal cords of the person that they were possessing. They would speak their name, the demon would, and then the person driving out the demon would command it by name to leave that person. And it would do that, usually. Although there's a couple instances even of Jesus' disciples not being able to do that. And he says this kind only comes out by prayer and fasting. Well, Jesus regularly prayed and fasted. Remember what I said just a few minutes ago about things that God might want to do in or through you or around you, but they're not ready for that because you're not spiritually prepared. Jesus was always prepared. So this demon was there was demons that were deaf and mute, and so if you were to have to get their name in order to cast them out, it would have to be able to hear you speaking that. It would have to be able to speak its name. And so it was believed that a Messiah would be able to cast out a demon of someone that was, a deaf and a mute demon. And Jesus had done that, but their normal or regular exorcists could not do it. Another thing, the third thing that they believed that a Messiah would have to do was heal someone with a birth defect, somebody that was born paralyzed or born blind. And Jesus did these things. He performed these miracles. A birth defect was thought to be God's judgment on sin, whether it was the sin of the parents or the sin of the child who somehow sinned in the womb and that it was therefore born with a birth defect. Jesus performed these miracles. The last thing, the fourth type of miracle that they expected a Messiah to perform was to raise somebody from the dead who had been dead for more than 3 days, which Jesus does right here. Now, if somebody were performing one or all of these signs, it would raise some flags. It would raise, it would start a procedure. And what they would do is somebody would report to the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin was 70 rulers over the people, and they would rule on religious matters and on other things to do with their religion. Now, they would report it to the Sanhedrin, who would then usually send a group of usually Pharisees to just kind of observe what this person was doing, this messianic figure or potential messianic figure. And Jesus wasn't the only one that had popped up with, messianic undertones. There were other people who preached and worked in the spirit of what the Messiah was expected to do, and so it was their job to investigate this and to rule on whether this was the Messiah or not, so that people wouldn't be deceived. And so they would send the Pharisees usually to observe this person as they would go about, and they would observe what they were doing, saying, teaching, the works they were performing. And then at that point, the Pharisees didn't really engage. They were just nearby. They were just there. And so they would observe, and then they would bring back their report to the Sanhedrin. And if the Sanhedrin thought that there needed to be some type of escalation, then they would move into an interrogation phase where both Sadducees, Pharisees, chief priests perhaps even would question this person. They might travel to where he was and observe his teaching and interrupt and ask questions, or they might bring him in front of the Sanhedrin. They might find him at one of the festivals in the temple and start questioning him there. All these things happened with Jesus. And they would question this person. They would question this supposed potentially messianic figure, and they would question him about all kinds of matters. And if they didn't believe that he fit the qualifications or marks of what they expected the Messiah to be and what the prophets had written about, then they would rule on his case and say that he could not or would not be the Messiah. By the way, if you read through the Gospels with these things in mind about that procedure and about what they expected for the miracles and the healings, you start to see some really cool things about what Jesus was doing in some of these things. You start to see the reason and motives behind some of these healings. Instead of acknowledging that Jesus was the Messiah, instead of acknowledging that clearly by their expectations, by the prophecies in the Old Testament, instead of acknowledging all these things, they rejected Jesus. It wasn't on account of some lack on his part or something that was missing. You see, he completed the entire picture. But what they were worried about, they said right here, they showed their hand right here in these verses that we read. Verse 47, the chief priests and the Pharisees called the council, the Sanhedrin, together and said, "What are we doing? For this man is performing many miraculous signs. If we allow him to go on this way, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away our sanctuary and our nation." You can read the verses after that, what a man named Caiaphas says, the high priest that year, and how he speaks that it's better if one person dies than that the whole nation suffers. You see, they rejected Jesus, and even though it fit perfectly into God's plan because he was the suffering Messiah, the suffering servant of Isaiah 52 and 53, even though he was the suffering servant, they rejected him. And it was to their detriment, it was to their loss of power, it was to their loss of credibility. And yet, so many times we reject Jesus as well. Oh, we might say, oh, he's my Lord, he's my Savior, but do we confess that he's our Lord? He's my Savior. He cleansed me of my sin, and I'm heavenward bound. And praise God for that. But do we reject him as Lord? Do we say that I won't allow Jesus to be the Lord of my life? You see, Jesus, by rightful position, should be in charge. He should be the Lord of your life, the one that rules over all that you do. Don't be like these leaders. Don't be like the Sanhedrin that says that I don't want to lose my position of power or authority. I don't want to lose my autonomy, so it's better if I just push Jesus aside. Jesus wants to be Lord of your life. Spend time with him. Spend time getting to know him, reading his word, reading about him in books of people that have written about him, in articles, listening to podcasts, especially spending time in prayer over the things that you're reading. Spend time serving Jesus Christ, by serving others, by serving in the church, by giving of your time, your resources, whatever it is. Spend time with Christ as Lord and Savior. And if you're not spending that time in devotion to Him, you're not ready for the moments that He's preparing all around you, the moments to share in the spiritual growth and well-being of others, moments to grow yourself spiritually speaking. If we're not spending that time devoted to Christ, then we're missing out on a whole world of possibilities that He has for us. You see, Jesus wants to take you deeper than you ever thought you could go in your walk with Him. He wants to walk closer and more intimately with you than you ever knew possible. But we're not ready for that so many times. So many times we have our own agenda and our own things, our own desires that we want to do, and we aren't listening to Christ speaking to us. He was right there in their midst. He was right there among them. In a few weeks, we'll see His trial just before the cross. The trial that they had that should have proclaimed Him the Messiah, but instead they wanted to do away with Him. In verse 53 of this chapter we're reading, chapter 11, from that day on, they planned together to kill Him. They'd already made up their mind that He was a threat to them, and they wanted to do away with Him. They didn't do that on account of the evidence. In fact, it was on account of the evidence that they planned this. It was account of the evidence that positively identified Him as the Messiah that they decided they needed to kill Him because it would get in their way. Don't make that mistake in your life. Go ahead and visit our website at zfnfamily.org, and you can go there and check out media postings for our recent media of both audio and video. And also, you can connect with us if you're a visitor by filling out a Connect card there. Also, we have something called Right Now Media that we purchase and subscribe to so that you can have a free access to it. If you go to the Right Now Media tab on our website, you can find out how to open an account with Right Now Media. It's free, it's beneficial, it'll help you in your walk with Christ. You fill out your profile there, fill out all the required info, check the box that you are part of Zephyr Hills First Church of the Nazarene in some way, shape, or form, and you'll be all set to go and ready to watch the videos that are there. So hopefully you take advantage of that and use it every week or every day. If you would like to give online, we would appreciate that, or you can also mail it in. And also visit goconference.com is a website for the conference that we're hosting at the end of March, on March 26th. Hope that you'll sign up and register for that. The website is finally live.